Thank you all for coming. We're gonna. It's a real pleasure to be here with WorldCom in Cannes, and we're going to be talking about sustainability communications, which feels quite appropriate given all the climate challenges that are being faced across the world. On that note, I think it's starting to rain, but I can guarantee you this conversation will keep you here. It will be interesting enough, I hope, to override any weather concerns. But no, let me introduce the panelists, who are all from WorldCom agencies. So furthest to my left, it's Corinna Voss, who's the Managing Director of HBI in Germany. So Corinna, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We've got Anita Nahal, who's a director at Kaizo from the UK. Welcome, Hi. Anita. And Thomas Jørgensen, who's chief advisor at Radius in Denmark.
Thank you.
So thank you all. So three very experienced PR practitioners, and in particular very experienced when it comes to talking about climate communication and engagement around sustainability. I think all of you here are keenly aware of how urgent the climate crisis is. And yet, for communicators, we are being faced with a range of challenges in terms of communicating around climate. And we're going to talk through some of those today. There are challenges around just making it a more relevant topic. It seems like climate conversation is less frequent than it should be. If we look at various elections around the world, climate is not the number one or number two or even sometimes the number three topic. And then, of course, there are challenges around making it relevant on a local level, around communicating complex ideas in a simple manner, and also because there are probably no quick wins and easy wins left, right? So we're talking about quite difficult challenges and quite difficult actions that need to be taken. So on that note, I'll start with the first question I have for you all. It should be the first issue for everyone, climate, and yet it isn't, as we're seeing from elections around the world and, dare I say, even at industry conferences. So how can we make sure that it matters, and how can we bring climate back up the agenda? And Thomas, I'll start with you. That's okay?
Thank you. Was expecting that question. Actually, I'd like to start with one of my clients. You may know, a very large pharmaceutical company. I had the pleasure of interviewing their US management the other day. They started by saying that they were getting pretty sick and tired of all this Danish green propaganda that we were sending their way on behalf of headquarters. It sort of felt out of touch with the real issues they were facing in that country, being the US. I thought about, so what problems could possibly be bigger than saving the world? But anyway, and she went on and said, given our large number of US employees, it feels rather non-inclusive the way you communicate. So that's the first time I've heard Danish green non-inclusive propaganda in the same sentence, actually trying to save the world. I started to think about, what are the real problems then? Well, I guess if you're living in Ukraine, you might have more urgent issues to think about. If you live in Southern Europe, think about immigration. That might seem as a more urgent issue. If you're somewhere bordering the Russian border, yeah. If you're in South Sudan, true. Even if you're in the US, if you need 2 jobs to feed your kids, that might also be an issue. So where does this come down to? It comes down to talking about sustainability really needs to hit the spot in terms of being relevant, of seeming to be important, of being so important for people they actually want to listen to you. Because if they don't feel it's important, if they feel it's irrelevant, they will not only not listen to you, they will actually get annoyed and say, don't take up my mind space listening to bullshit. Don't take up my mind trying to focus on something irrelevant. I've got a bigger fish to fry over here. So immense focus on the content, on the materiality of what we're talking about. Otherwise, we'll simply turn people against us.
Thanks, Thomas. So I'm just going to move, because I'm in the rain. So I will come over here. Anita, as Thomas mentioned, it's a real challenge, I think, trying to make climate, a relevant and important topic when people are facing so many other challenges in the world today. Thomas mentioned some of them. We've got war, we've got multiple wars, we have famine, we've got a whole range of things. So how do you do that from your perspective?
I think it's about making it relevant to people's lives. I think it's making it actionable. It's making it clear and easy to understand. I think we're talking about fear-mongering, and that's not what we're trying to achieve here. It's about, practical steps that companies and corporations are taking and how that can positively influence our day-to-day lives. I also think, there's definitely an element, as Thomas was saying, it's not necessarily fashionable, but it's not currently on the radar consistently across cultures and across countries. But I think as communicators and as consultants, it's our job to keep advising our clients and the companies that we work with that they need to keep talking about this, they need to keep getting the data, they need to keep preparing. So when all of a sudden there is an emergency right in front of our face and we need to be ready and prepared to deal with it. So I think it's on us as well to make sure it stays on the radar of our clients and the companies that we're working with.
And Corinna, one of the challenges that comes up frequently is that this is not necessarily a simple topic. Sometimes you see it reduced to simple messages, but increasingly there's quite a lot of complexity involved. So how do you communicate some of these complex messages, whether it's in terms of scientific data, whether it's in terms of the actions that are required at different levels? How can you do that in a successful way? And I'm wondering whether you might have any examples of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anita already mentioned data. Data is pretty important in connection with sustainability comms, but it's very difficult to understand by people because it's very scientific. We work for the EU, Copernicus Weather and Climate Services, pretty important initiative, and we work with scientists. And what we do now was a long learning curve. Anybody who has ever worked with scientists know how this works, right? But we educated them over the years, and now we work a lot with pictures. For example, glacier melting. We made an ice cube out of the water that is melting every year and put it in comparison of the Eiffel Tower, so people can see how immense the effect is of the melting water. But I think that is something that is also challenging because if you do it across countries, Thomas already mentioned that in the US it's maybe differently perceived. So working with pictures and something that resonates with people and make it understandable in all various cultures and countries is very important for us in the communication.
Sure. Thomas?
I have a follow-up. So complexity really is a challenge. So one of our clients is Denmark's biggest CO2 emitter. I don't know if you know who that is, but they're 14 times bigger than number 2. 2 million tons every year. It's a cement factory. Now, they don't let out CO2 because they think it's fun or because they are evil and have sharp teeth. They do it because it's a natural physical process of producing cement. And because it's a natural physical process, it's difficult to communicate. It's even more complex to do something about. This CO2 is embedded in their raw materials. You cannot just remove it. You heat it up to 1500 degrees, which you cannot do by electricity, then even more is emitted. So it will take them 5 years to build the complex plant to get rid of it. How do we convince a politician who's only got 3 years left in office that he should spend time and energy on listening to this complex message? How do we convince consumers that this is not an easy fix? They should think about the cement they buy. They want solutions here and now, not in 5 years' time. So we spend a lot of time trying to explain this complexity issue of trying to do some real things that really move the needle, such as fixing CO2 from cement. Cement is 8% of the world's CO2. It's double that of global shipping. But the solution is not straightforward. It's 5 years ahead. 5 billion DKK, by the way, not an easy fix.
And then another thing we see so much is the preponderance of greenwashing, which doesn't help at all. And that, I think the impact of that is that it has made people far more skeptical of sustainability claims in general. So Anita, maybe I can come to you if you have examples of how you can ensure that the messages you're trying to communicate can stand up to that kind of scrutiny.
Sure. So I think from our perspective and the work that we do at Kaizo, so we work with the coffee industry and coffee companies across Europe, and that's quite an interesting position because coffee as a commodity is impacted directly by climate change. It might not exist if we don't adapt and evolve, but it also has an impact on climate change directly by the way it's farmed and grown, etc. So we've come into quite an established space. So the challenge for us was, okay, all these individual companies have their own sustainability agendas, their own policies. What can we add? What can we bring to this space so we can speak with credibility and speak with authority? So we did a lot of work with them on positioning and kind of the impact and the role that we will have and on the industry itself. So we're really clear on we are addressing a gap. We're addressing a clear need, and this is going to have a benefit, and here is how. We did a lot of work around messaging and a lot of work on understanding the landscape, the stakeholders. But I think really for us as well, it was about building credibility through partnerships. So we've worked a lot with research bodies, organizations who are really well known and established in that space. So partnering with them. So again, we go back to this point about data. So we're kind of, everything that we're doing is robust and it's supported by good data. We're bringing new data into the space as well. And we're also building our own expert community. So it's this halo effect that we're talking about. So while sustainability is something relatively new that we're talking about, we're partnering with these experts in this space and building those relationships. So yeah, we can go out there and make sure what we're saying really holds up and is rooted in facts, in evidence, in data. That's really important.
Yeah. I think a really good point on the importance of partnerships to help verify whatever claims you're making. Corinna, any thoughts from you on how to kind of make sure that you're communicating with credibility?
Yeah, I think the times where you plant a tree and that's a communication program are over, right? The people get more educated on sustainability. They don't fall for not serious campaigns anymore. So what you need to do is really make sure that you have the qualification process of your program, that you have the certificates, that you are aligned with regulations. All this is part of the comms strategy you have to look at. We have a client that has launched a big logistics company that has launched what they call the alternative fuel program, where they offer to services HVO-based logistics, and we took a lot of attention on the qualification process because that is sometimes really dubious when you look at industries, how they actually certify the process of a sustainable program. So that's really very important. And not because I'm German, but it's generally important.
No, certification, very important to all of us. Okay, so the other thing we are seeing much more of now, I think it's fair to say, is green hushing. Mm-hmm. So companies who are now afraid to talk about their progress in terms of sustainability and on climate because they may get because of the backlash, because of scrutiny. Sometimes there's political backlash for being too woke. So I want to come to all three of you and ask, what is your advice for your clients and for companies who maybe are trying to keep their heads below the parapet? Thomas, I'll start with you.
Yes, well, three things come back again and again and again. First thing, it must be material. It must move the needle. Otherwise, people simply don't want to listen to it. If somebody's trying to sell me a bikini of used fishing nets, well, one, I'm not really in the market, and two, I don't really think it moves the needle. So move the needle, that's the first thing. Second, make it understandable. And third thing, make damn sure it's true what you say. So material, understandable, and truth, that's it. Imagine the opposite. Somebody telling you something that's irrelevant and you don't get it, and it's not even true. I mean, you've lost the drain. But we do have customers who try to persuade us doing these kind of things.
Anita.
I would pick up on the point that you said about progress. I think that's really important because I think there's a bit of, especially with some of the clients we speak to, is an obsession with almost being perfect. And it's not about that. I think it's about showing progress. It's a journey. It takes a while to get there. There's not, as we talked about quick wins earlier as well, it's not, I don't think it's not, sustainability is so complex. It's so huge. There's no one definition of being sustainable or not being sustainable. I think it's really about showing the journey that you are on. I think being quite honest about that and saying, look, we're doing this, but we know we could do more. There's more work that we could be doing better. I think that's something we always talk about with our clients as well. And just being transparent about the data that you have got, where, again, areas that you need to work on. And I think a lot of the work that we've done with the consumer healthcare industry in particular, transparency is a really big priority for us. I think in that industry in particular, is products that you are putting on your skin, you're taking medication, you're putting it in your hair. So for a long time, that's an industry where we've been working to be transparent about ingredients, what goes into the products, the supply chain. So I think that's an industry that's really been leading in that sense. So I think trying to take a lot, looking at examples there, and how we can advise others. But I think I would say is don't focus on being perfect, just making progress towards this ultimate goal and just being honest.
Yeah, good advice. And Corinna, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the thing with sustainability is, or with environmental change, is we don't experience it every day, right? So you have to actually be very open and you have to think long term, like Anita said, because it's a process for the companies to innovate their programs, to be sustainable and so on. So I think when it comes to comms and sustainability, there are no quick wins. There have to be programs and long-term communication and education, yeah? It's not quick, short, just a release or something. It's a long-term process.
I think greenwashing, greenhushing, at the moment is definitely in response to the environment we talked about at the beginning, that there's elections, half the world are going to vote, so that everybody's been quite quiet on issues like this. They're a little bit controversial, there's more regulation, so I think understandably a lot of clients are afraid and they're going to be exposed. So I think, it's going back to what we said about just being honest, being transparent, and just getting your data points in line and communicating what we can.
Is there a need to remind companies just how important it is for them to speak up? Because if they don't, then, I think it encourages a climate, forgive the pun, it encourages a climate of silence around the issue.
Exactly. And it's a leadership opportunity as well. I think everyone uses the example of Unilever because they, from a consumer healthcare perspective, for years and years, they've been really shouting about sustainability, and they've kind of been the ones to follow, really. But definitely, I think it's, going back to this, we don't have to be perfect. If you're doing things that can help advance and can set an example for smaller companies or for other sectors, then why shouldn't we talk about it? But there's probably an element of education and understanding as well for consumers, but also media, that, they're looking to pick maybe faults. So that, again, it's another reason why companies are a bit shy away from it. So
we discussed earlier, I think, the political issues on sustainability, because there have to be, I think the politics at the moment, sustainability is not, or environmental issues are not top of the list for most politicians as well. But companies that want to issue programs and produce more sustainable, they need regulations. They need a basis to work on it. And that's sometimes missing. We see that very often, that they say, I would like to switch to alternative energy, solar, anything, but there is no regulation. So I think all sustainability, also the comms, has a political part, which is very important. And I think you had a good point by saying, because it's so long term, our politicians are short term. There is a conflict, obviously, right?
With shareholders too, I think.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. I think that's all we have time for, unfortunately, but really good advice, I think, for all of you here that are involved in climate and sustainability communications. I don't think I need to remind you how important a topic it is, and yes, there are challenges, and yes, we are in this crazy election year, but let's try and keep it top of mind for everyone, for all of us. Thank you. And thank you to our panelists, please.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.